The train whistle echoed through the dusty streets of Caldwell, Idaho, on that scorching August afternoon in 1882. But the man Helena Jenkins had been waiting 3 months to meet never stepped off onto the platform. She stood there until the conductor gave her a pitying look, and the last passenger disappeared into the crowd, clutching the faded photograph of William Thatcher in her trembling hands. The summer sun beat down mercilessly as she read his telegram for the 100th time, the one that had arrived 2 days ago saying he would be on this train without fail. Helena smoothed down her best blue calico dress, the one she had sewn specifically for this occasion, and felt something inside her chest crack like dried earth. At 22 years old, she had gambled everything on this arrangement. Her parents had died of influenza the previous winter back in Pennsylvania, leaving her with nothing but debts and the small house that the bank had already claimed. The advertisement for mail-order brides had seemed like providence, and William's letters had been kind, if somewhat formal. He had promised her a home, a future, a place in this growing Western territory. She had sold everything she owned to afford the train ticket west, arriving in Caldwell 3 days ago with a single trunk and enough money for 4 nights at the boarding house. Tonight would be her 4th night. Tomorrow she would have nothing. Helena walked slowly away from the station, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed in public. She made it as far as the small park near the church before her legs gave out. Sinking onto a wooden bench beneath a cottonwood tree, she finally let the tears fall. They came hot and fast, carrying with them all the fear and desperation she had been holding back. She had no money, no family, no prospects. The boarding house keeper had already been eyeing her suspiciously, and Helena knew what happened to young women alone in frontier towns when they ran out of options. "Miss, are you all right?" The voice was deep and gentle, and Helena looked up through her tears to see a tall man standing a respectful distance away. He held his hat in his hands, revealing dark hair that fell just past his collar. His face was weathered from the sun but handsome in a rugged way, with striking green eyes that held genuine concern. He wore dusty work clothes and boots, and a bandana hung loosely around his neck. "I'm fine," Helena managed, wiping at her face with her hands, mortified to be seen in such a state. "Forgive me for saying so, miss, but you don't look fine." He took a cautious step closer. "My mama raised me to help folks in trouble. Is there anything I can do?" Helena shook her head, fresh tears spilling over. "Unless you can conjure a disappeared fiancé or a bag of gold coins, I'm afraid I'm beyond help." The man's expression shifted to understanding. "Mail order arrangement," she nodded miserably. "I sold everything to come here. He was supposed to be on that train. William Thatcher, do you know him?" Something flickered across the man's face. "I knew a William Thatcher once. Left town about a month ago with a saloon girl named Rose. Headed to California, I heard." The words hit Helena like a physical blow. She had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed made it real. William had never intended to marry her. He had probably forgotten all about her the moment Rose had batted her eyelashes at him. "So he's gone," she whispered. "And I'm stranded here with nothing." The man was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those thoughtful green eyes. Then he did something Helena never could have anticipated. He dropped to one knee right there on the dusty ground beside the bench. "Miss, I know this is going to sound crazy. We don't know each other at all. But I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to think about it seriously before you answer." He took a deep breath. "My name is Thomas Irvine. I own a cattle ranch about 10 miles outside of town. It's not fancy, but it's prosperous and growing. I've been looking for a wife for some time now, but I'm not much good at courting and such. If you need a husband and I need a wife, maybe we could help each other out. I'll give you a home, protection, and respect. I'll never raise a hand to you, and I'll work hard to provide for you. All I ask is that you run the household and give our arrangement an honest try. What do you say?" Helena stared at him in complete shock. "You want to marry me, right now, but you don't even know me. I know you're brave enough to travel across the country for a new life. I know you're honorable enough to cry over a broken promise instead of getting angry. I know you're in trouble, and I was raised to help people in trouble, especially ladies." Thomas met her eyes steadily. "I also know that you've got kind eyes and a pretty face, which is more than some arranged marriages start with. We could go to Reverend Mitchell right now if you're willing. The church is right over there." "This is insane," Helena breathed, but her mind was racing. What choice did she have? She could refuse and spend tomorrow night on the streets, or accept this stranger's offer and at least have a roof over her head. But marriage was permanent, binding. She would be tied to this man forever. "I know it's sudden," Thomas said, standing up and brushing dust from his knee. "But life out here moves fast. Sometimes you have to make quick decisions. I promise you I'm a good man. You can ask anyone in town about Thomas Irvine. I pay my debts, I keep my word, and I treat people fair. I'll do right by you, Miss Jenkins, Helena Jenkins, Miss Jenkins. I'll do right by you. You have my word on that." Helena looked into his face, searching for any sign of deception or cruelty. She found only honesty and a hint of nervousness that made him seem more human, less like some strange savior appearing out of nowhere. Her practical side warred with her fear. She knew nothing about ranching, nothing about this man, nothing about building a life in Idaho. But what alternative did she have? "If I say yes," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not some delicate flower who needs rescuing. I work hard, I'm honest. I have a temper when pushed too far, and I won't be treated like property or a servant. If we do this, it has to be a real partnership." A slow smile spread across Thomas's face, transforming it entirely. "Miss Jenkins, I wouldn't want it any other way. I need a partner, not a decoration. Ranch life is hard work, and I need someone who can handle themselves." Helena stood up, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was madness, complete and utter madness. But something in her gut told her that Thomas Irvine was telling the truth, that he was exactly who he claimed to be. "All right," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Let's go talk to the Reverend." Thomas's smile widened and he offered her his arm. "Thank you. I promise you won't regret this." They walked together to the white wooden church, and Helena felt as though she were moving through a dream. Just an hour ago she had been standing on the train platform, waiting for one man. Now she was about to marry a complete stranger. The absurdity of it all made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. Reverend Mitchell was a portly man in his 50s with kind eyes and a full gray beard. He looked surprised when Thomas and Helena appeared at his door, but he ushered them inside without hesitation. "Thomas Irvine, as I live and breathe. What brings you to town on a Tuesday afternoon? I need you to perform a marriage ceremony, Reverend. Right now, if you're willing." The Reverend's eyebrows shot up, and he looked between Thomas and Helena with undisguised curiosity. "This is rather sudden, isn't it? Miss, are you entering this marriage of your own free will?" "I am," Helena said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "My previous arrangement fell through, and Mr. Irvine has offered me an honorable alternative. I'm accepting willingly." Reverend Mitchell studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but I'll want to speak with the young lady alone for a moment first, if you don't mind, Thomas." Thomas nodded and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The Reverend gestured for Helena to sit and took a chair across from her. "Now then, miss, tell me honestly, are you being coerced in any way? Is there anything you need to tell me?" Helena shook her head. "No, Reverend. The situation is exactly as it appears. I came here expecting to marry a man named William Thatcher, but he never showed up. I have no money and no family. Mr. Irvine offered me a solution, and I'm choosing to accept it. Is it unconventional? Yes, but I don't see that I have better options, and he seems like a decent man." "Thomas is one of the best men I know," the Reverend said firmly. "He's honest, hardworking, and God-fearing. But marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly. You're making a lifetime commitment to a man you just met." "I understand that. But I was about to make a lifetime commitment to a man I had only exchanged letters with. At least I've looked Mr. Irvine in the eye and heard his voice." Helena straightened her shoulders. "I'm not foolish, Reverend. I know this is risky, but sometimes life doesn't give us perfect choices. We have to make the best decision we can with what we have." Reverend Mitchell smiled at that. "You're a wise young woman. Very well. Let's bring Thomas back in and make this official." The ceremony was simple and quick. There were no flowers, no music, no guests. Just Helena and Thomas standing before the Reverend in the quiet church, speaking vows that would bind them together forever. When Thomas slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Helena noticed that his hands were calloused but clean, and they trembled slightly. It made her feel a little better to know she wasn't the only one who was nervous. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Mitchell said with a smile. Thomas looked at Helena questioningly, and she nodded. He leaned down and pressed a chaste, gentle kiss to her lips. It was brief and respectful, but Helena felt a flutter in her stomach nonetheless. Then it was done. She was Mrs. Thomas Irvine, married to a man she had known for less than an hour. They signed the marriage certificate, and Thomas paid the Reverend. Then they stepped out into the afternoon sunshine as husband and wife. "I need to get your things from the boarding house," Thomas said. "Then we'll head out to the ranch. It'll take us about 2 hours by wagon." Helena nodded, still feeling dazed. They walked through town together, and she noticed people staring. Thomas seemed oblivious or unconcerned, greeting several people by name as they passed. At the boarding house, Mrs. Crowley's eyes nearly popped out of her head when Helena announced she was married and checking out. "Married? To whom?" "To me, Mrs. Crowley," Thomas said pleasantly, carrying Helena's trunk down the stairs as though it weighed nothing. "We just came from the church." Mrs. Crowley looked like she had 1,000 questions, but Thomas didn't give her time to ask them. He settled Helena's bill, loaded the trunk onto his wagon, and helped Helena up onto the seat. Then they were rolling out of town, leaving Caldwell behind. The landscape opened up around them, vast and beautiful in the late afternoon light. Rolling hills covered in golden grass stretched as far as Helena could see, interrupted here and there by clusters of cottonwood trees. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow even in August. It was nothing like Pennsylvania, but there was a stark beauty to it that took Helena's breath away. "It's lovely," she said softly. "It can be harsh in winter," Thomas said, handling the reins with easy confidence. "But I love this land. I came out here 5 years ago with almost nothing. Worked as a ranch hand for 3 years, saved every penny, and finally bought my own spread 2 years ago. It's not the biggest ranch around, but it's mine, and I'm building it into something I can be proud of." "Tell me about it," Helena said, grateful for something to focus on besides the surreal nature of her situation. Thomas's face lit up as he talked. He had 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and 50 acres of good grazing land with access to a creek. He grew hay for winter feed and had just built a new barn last year. His house was small but solid, built of logs with a stone fireplace. He had a hired hand named Jack who helped with the heavy work and stayed in a small cabin on the property. "Jack's a good man," Thomas said. "Quiet, but dependable. He was injured in a mining accident a few years back and can't do heavy lifting anymore, but he's excellent with horses. He'll be surprised to see I've brought home a wife." "I imagine everyone will be surprised," Helena said wryly. Thomas glanced at her. "Are you having second thoughts?" "I'm having about 1,000 thoughts," Helena admitted. "But no, not second thoughts exactly. More like wondering if I'm going to wake up and find this was all a very strange dream." "It's real," Thomas said quietly, "and I meant what I said. I'll be a good husband to you, Helena. I'll give you time to adjust. I'm not expecting you to fall in love with me overnight or anything like that. We'll take things slow, get to know each other. The house has 2 bedrooms. You can have your own space until you feel comfortable." The knot of anxiety in Helena's chest loosened slightly. "Thank you. That's very considerate." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Helena found herself studying her new husband from the corner of her eye. He was handsome in a rugged way, probably around 27 or 28 years old. His profile was strong, with a straight nose and a firm jaw. His hands on the reins were confident and capable. He seemed like exactly what he claimed to be, an honest rancher trying to build a good life. "Why haven't you married before now?" Helena asked. "Surely there are available women in Caldwell." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "There are a few, but most of them are either too young or already spoken for. The truth is, I've been so focused on building up the ranch that I haven't taken much time for courting. And like I said, I'm not much good at it anyway. I get tongue-tied around ladies at social gatherings. Probably would have stayed a bachelor until I was old and gray if I hadn't seen you crying in the park today." "So you propose to strange women regularly?" Helena asked, and was surprised to hear a teasing note in her own voice. Thomas laughed, a warm, rich sound that made Helena smile. "No, just the one. You looked like you needed help and I needed a wife. Seemed like fate, or insanity. Maybe a bit of both." The sun was beginning to set when they finally turned off the main road onto a narrower track. They crested a hill, and Helena got her first view of the Irvine ranch. The house sat in a small valley with the creek running behind it. It was indeed small, just 1 story, but it looked sturdy and well-maintained. The barn was new and painted red, and a simple corral held several horses. Cattle grazed on the hillsides, and the whole scene had a peaceful, prosperous air to it. "It's beautiful," Helena said honestly. "It's home," Thomas replied, and she could hear the pride in his voice. A wiry man with graying hair emerged from the barn as they approached. His limp was noticeable but didn't seem to slow him down much. He stared in obvious surprise as Thomas helped Helena down from the wagon. "Jack, this is my wife, Helena. We were married this afternoon. Helena, this is Jack Porter, my right-hand man." Jack's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. "Wife. Thomas, did you hit your head or something? It's a long story. Can you help me get her trunk inside? We'll talk later." Jack shot Helena a curious but not unfriendly look and moved to help with the trunk. Thomas led Helena to the house and opened the door for her. The interior was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and handmade furniture. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with the stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 doors led off to what must be the bedrooms. "It's not fancy," Thomas said, suddenly looking uncertain. "But it's solid and warm. You can change anything you want, make it more homey. I'm not particular about decorating and such." Helena walked slowly around the room, taking it all in. There was a sturdy table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and a cook stove that looked relatively new. Shelves held dishes and cooking supplies. It was sparse but functional, the home of a man who lived alone and focused on practicalities. "It's fine," she said. "Better than fine." "It's more than I expected." Thomas showed her the two bedrooms. His was clearly the one on the right with a large bed, a dresser, and not much else. The room on the left was smaller with a narrow bed and an empty wardrobe. "I use this room for storage mostly, but I cleared it out yesterday. I was thinking about maybe getting a hired girl to help with the house, so I figured I should make it presentable. Lucky timing, I guess." He set her trunk at the foot of the bed. "This is yours for as long as you want it." "Thank you," Helena said softly, touched by his consideration. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly awkward. "I should go help Jack with the evening chores. There's food in the pantry if you're hungry. Make yourself at home, look around, settle in however you need to. I'll be back in about an hour." He left, and Helena sat down on the narrow bed, her legs suddenly weak. She was married. She lived on a ranch in Idaho. Her husband was a kind stranger who had proposed to her in a park. It all seemed impossible, and yet here she was. She spent the next hour unpacking her trunk and exploring the house. Her belongings looked pitifully few in the empty wardrobe, the small collection of dresses and underthings she had brought from Pennsylvania. She found the pantry well stocked with basics like flour, beans, coffee, and dried meat. The stove was still warm, and she decided to make dinner as a way to keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning in circles. By the time Thomas and Jack came in from their chores, she had managed to produce a simple meal of biscuits, beans, and bacon. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and filling. Both men looked surprised and pleased. "You didn't have to do that," Thomas said. "I know this has been an overwhelming day for you." "I needed something to do," Helena replied. "Besides, we all have to eat." They sat down together at the table, and Jack said a simple grace. Then they ate, and Helena found herself relaxing slightly. The food was good, the men had healthy appetites and complimented her cooking, and the whole scene felt almost normal. "So," Jack said finally, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, "are you going to tell me how this happened, Thomas?" Thomas glanced at Helena and she nodded. He told the story simply, leaving out nothing. Jack listened with growing amazement, shaking his head when Thomas finished. "That's the craziest thing I've ever heard, and I once saw a man try to lasso a grizzly bear. How did that turn out?" Helena asked. "About as well as you'd expect. The man lived, but he was never quite right in the head after." Jack grinned at her. "Welcome to the ranch, Mrs. Irvine. I suspect things are going to be a lot more interesting around here with you on the property." After dinner, Jack excused himself to his cabin. Thomas helped Helena clear the dishes, working alongside her at the wash basin. It felt strange and intimate, this domestic task with a man who was legally her husband but still a stranger. "Are you tired?" Thomas asked when they finished. "It's been a long day." "Exhausted," Helena admitted. "I think I'd like to go to bed if that's all right. Of course, this is your home now. You don't need permission to do anything." Thomas hesitated. "I meant what I said about taking things slow. Your bedroom has a lock on the inside of the door. I won't ever come in without your permission." "Thank you," Helena said, feeling tears prick at her eyes again. His kindness was overwhelming. "Thomas, why are you being so good to me? You don't even know me." He was quiet for a moment, his green eyes serious. "My parents had a good marriage. They respected each other, worked together, and built a life they were both proud of. That's what I want. I figure the best way to get it is to start by treating my wife with respect and kindness, and hope she'll do the same for me. Besides, you seem like a good person, Helena. I liked you the moment I saw you." Helena felt something warm bloom in her chest. "I liked you too," she admitted softly. I wouldn't have said yes otherwise, no matter how desperate I was. They said good night, and Helena retreated to her small room. She changed into her nightgown and slipped under the covers, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She could hear Thomas moving around in the next room, the creak of his bed as he lay down. It was strange knowing he was so close, separated only by a thin wall. Her husband. The word still didn't feel real, but as Helena drifted off to sleep, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Hope. Maybe this wild, impulsive decision would turn out to be the best thing that had ever happened to her. Only time would tell. The next morning, Helena woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of men's voices outside. Sunlight streamed through the small window, and for a moment she was disoriented, forgetting where she was. Then it all came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. She dressed quickly and emerged from her room to find Thomas at the stove, frying eggs and bacon. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Good morning. I hope I didn't wake you. I'm not used to being quiet in the mornings." "You didn't wake me. That smells wonderful." They ate breakfast together, and Thomas outlined his plans for the day. He and Jack needed to ride out to check on the cattle in the north pasture, which would take most of the day. Helena could rest, explore the property, or do whatever she wanted. "I feel like I should be doing something useful," Helena said. "What needs to be done around here?" Thomas looked surprised. "Well, the house could use a good cleaning. I do my best, but I'm not very thorough. The vegetable garden behind the house is mostly weeds at this point. And the chickens need feeding and their eggs collected. But you don't have to do all that today. You've only just arrived." "I'd rather stay busy," Helena said honestly. "It'll help me adjust." So Thomas showed her where everything was before he rode out with Jack. Helena spent the morning cleaning the house from top to bottom, sweeping floors, scrubbing surfaces, and organizing shelves. It felt good to work, to make this space her own. She found the garden in even worse shape than Thomas had suggested, but she could see the potential. With some work, it could produce vegetables through the fall. She was on her hands and knees pulling weeds when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw a wagon coming down the track. A woman about her own age was driving, with two small children beside her. She pulled to a stop near the house and climbed down, staring at Helena with undisguised curiosity. "Hello," the woman called. "I'm looking for Thomas Irvine. Is he around?" "He's out checking cattle," Helena said, standing up and brushing dirt from her skirt. "I'm Helena Irvine. Can I help you?" The woman's eyes widened. "Irvine? As in Mrs. Thomas Irvine? That's right. We were married yesterday." "Married? But Thomas has never even mentioned courting anyone." The woman shook her head in amazement, then seemed to remember her manners. "I'm sorry, I'm being terribly rude. I'm Mary Sullivan. My husband Patrick and I have the ranch 3 miles east of here. These are our children, Benjamin and Sarah." The children, a boy of about 5 and a girl of 3, peeked shyly from behind their mother's skirts. Helena smiled at them and invited Mary in for coffee. Mary accepted eagerly, clearly dying to hear the whole story. Helena told her the truth, and Mary listened with growing astonishment. When Helena finished, Mary shook her head slowly. "That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard. Thomas Irvine, of all people. He's always been so quiet and reserved. I never would have guessed he had such a grand gesture in him." "It was certainly unexpected," Helena agreed. "Well, you couldn't have married a better man," Mary said firmly. "Thomas is solid as they come. He helped Patrick and me when we first moved here, loaned us tools and gave advice. He's one of the good ones." She paused. "But you must be overwhelmed. New place, new husband, new life all at once." "It's a lot," Helena admitted, "but I'm managing." Mary reached over and squeezed her hand. "You have a friend now. I live close enough that we can visit regularly. It can get lonely out here, especially for women. We have to stick together." Helena felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you. I'd like that very much." Mary stayed for an hour, chattering cheerfully about the local families, the town gossip, and ranch life in general. She invited Helena and Thomas to dinner the following Sunday, and Helena accepted gladly. When Mary and her children finally left, Helena felt measurably better. She had a friend, or at least the beginning of one. That made this strange new life feel a little less daunting. Thomas returned late in the afternoon, dusty and tired. He looked surprised and pleased to see the house cleaned and the garden partially weeded. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "I wanted to. Mary Sullivan came by the way. She invited us to dinner on Sunday. That's good. The Sullivans are nice folks." Thomas washed up at the basin. "How was your first full day?" "Productive," Helena said. "Strange, but productive. I'm starting to understand the rhythm of the place." They fell into a routine over the next few days. Thomas and Jack worked outside while Helena managed the house and garden. She cooked, cleaned, tended the chickens, and slowly made the house feel more like a home. Thomas was unfailingly kind and respectful, always thanking her for meals and asking about her day. They talked in the evenings after dinner, learning about each other in bits and pieces. Helena learned that Thomas had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 children. His father had been a farmer, and Thomas had learned hard work from an early age. He had come west after his father died, seeking a fresh start and new opportunities. He loved the land, loved raising cattle, and dreamed of building the ranch into something that could support a family for generations. Thomas learned that Helena had been an only child, raised by loving but poor parents. Her father had been a shopkeeper, and her mother had taken in sewing. Helena could read and write well, loved books, and had always wanted to see more of the world. She was practical and hardworking, but she also had dreams of her own. "What kind of dreams?" Thomas asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I used to imagine having a house full of children," Helena said softly. "A big family, lots of noise and laughter. My parents wanted more children but were never blessed with them. I always felt lonely growing up. I wanted something different for my own life." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "I'd like that too. A full house, children running around. That's why I wanted to get married, to start building that future." Their eyes met, and Helena felt something shift between them. This was no longer just a practical arrangement between strangers. They were beginning to genuinely connect, to see the possibility of a real partnership, maybe even love. Sunday dinner at the Sullivans was a cheerful, noisy affair. Patrick Sullivan was a big, friendly Irishman with a booming laugh and an easy manner. He teased Thomas mercilessly about his sudden marriage, but it was all good-natured. The children warmed up to Helena quickly, and she found herself enjoying their company immensely. "You're a natural with them," Mary observed, watching Helena help little Sarah with her food. "I've always loved children," Helena replied. On the ride home, Thomas was quiet, and Helena could tell something was on his mind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just that you looked happy today, really happy. It was nice to see." Helena felt warmth spread through her chest. "I was happy. The Sullivans are lovely people, and it felt good to be part of a community." "I want you to be happy here," Thomas said quietly. "I want this to be a real home for you, not just a place you're stuck because you had no other choice." Helena reached over and touched his arm gently. "Thomas, I won't lie and say this is what I imagined for my life. But I'm not unhappy. You've been nothing but kind to me. You've given me a home and safety and respect. That's more than a lot of women get from husbands they've known for years. I'm grateful for that." "I don't want your gratitude," Thomas said, his voice rough. "I want more than that." "What do you want?" He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. In the moonlight, his eyes were dark and intense. "I want you to care for me the way I'm starting to care for you. I know it's only been a week. I know I have no right to ask for more than what we agreed on. But Helena, you're not just some arrangement to me anymore. You're my wife and I'm falling for you. I can't help it." Helena's heart pounded in her chest. She had felt the growing attraction between them, the way her pulse quickened when he was near, the way she found herself watching him when he worked. But hearing him say it out loud made it real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if we rush this and it all falls apart? What if I'm not what you need? What if I disappoint you?" "You could never disappoint me," Thomas said firmly. He reached out and gently cupped her face with his calloused hand. "And we don't have to rush anything. I just wanted you to know how I feel." I couldn't keep it inside anymore. Helena leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I'm starting to care for you too, more than I expected to. You're a good man, Thomas Irvine. Maybe the best man I've ever known." He kissed her then, and this kiss was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. It was deep and passionate, full of all the feelings they had been holding back. Helena kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I think," Helena said shakily, "that I don't need my own bedroom anymore." Thomas's eyes widened. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured." "I'm sure. I want to be your wife in every sense of the word. I want to build this life with you for real." They drove the rest of the way home in charged silence, both acutely aware of the decision they had just made. When they reached the house, Thomas helped Helena down from the wagon and pulled her close. "Last chance to change your mind," he murmured against her hair. "I'm not changing my mind." That night marked a true beginning for them. They came together as husband and wife, tentative at first but quickly growing more confident. Thomas was gentle and patient, making sure Helena felt cherished and wanted. Afterward they lay tangled together in his bed, her head on his chest and his arms around her. "This feels right," Helena whispered. "Like this is where I was always meant to end up." "Fate," Thomas said, echoing his words from that first day, "or insanity, but either way I'm grateful for it." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Helena's life. She and Thomas grew closer every day, learning each other's rhythms and quirks. She discovered that he sang while he worked, old songs his mother had taught him. He discovered that she talked to the chickens as if they could understand her, giving each one a name and personality. They worked side by side whenever possible. Helena learned to ride a horse so she could accompany Thomas on short trips around the property. He taught her about cattle and grazing patterns and weather signs. She taught him how to cook more than just basic survival food, and soon their dinners became more varied and flavorful. Jack watched their growing romance with obvious approval. "Never seen Thomas so happy," he told Helena one afternoon. "You're good for him, Mrs. Irvine." "He's good for me too," Helena replied. Autumn arrived with cool winds and changing leaves. Helena harvested what she could from the garden and worked on preserving food for winter. Mary Sullivan became a close friend, visiting often and teaching Helena the particular skills needed for frontier life. Helena taught Mary some new recipes, and they spent pleasant afternoons together while their husbands worked. One October morning, Helena woke feeling nauseated. She barely made it outside before she was sick. Thomas rushed after her, holding her hair back and looking worried. "Are you all right? Should I get the doctor?" Helena wiped her mouth and looked up at him, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and joy. "I don't think a doctor is necessary." "Thomas, I think I might be with child." His face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, fierce joy, and settled on something that looked like awe. "A baby, are you sure?" "Not entirely, but all the signs are there. I haven't had my monthly courses in 2 months, and now this morning sickness." Helena touched her still flat stomach wonderingly. "We're going to have a baby." Thomas let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before setting her down carefully as if she might break. "A baby, Helena, this is wonderful. We have to tell everyone. We have to prepare. We need to make a cradle and get baby clothes," and Helena laughed and put her hand over his mouth. "Slow down. We have months yet. But yes, we need to prepare. And I'd like to see the doctor in town just to make sure everything is as it should be." They rode into Caldwell the next day, and Dr. Morrison confirmed what Helena already knew. She was about 2 months along and due in late April or early May. The doctor pronounced her healthy and gave her advice on caring for herself during pregnancy. Walking out of the doctor's office, Helena felt like her life had come full circle. It had been less than 3 months since she had stood crying on a bench in Caldwell, alone and desperate. Now she had a husband who loved her, a home, a community, and a baby on the way. It seemed impossible that so much could change so quickly. "What are you thinking?" Thomas asked, his arm around her waist. "That I'm the luckiest woman in Idaho," Helena said honestly. "Maybe the luckiest woman anywhere." Winter arrived with snow and freezing temperatures. The ranch work became harder, and Thomas and Jack spent long hours making sure the cattle had access to water and food. Helena kept the house warm and welcoming, always having hot food and coffee ready when the men came in from the cold. Her pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she grew frustrated with her increasing size and the limitations it imposed. Thomas became even more protective, insisting she rest often and not overwork herself. Jack started doing some of the heavier household chores without being asked, showing a quiet kindness that made Helena tear up more than once. Pregnancy had made her emotions run wild, and she cried at the smallest things. "I'm sorry," she sobbed one evening after crying over nothing in particular. "I don't know why I'm like this." "It's all right," Thomas soothed, holding her close. "You're growing our baby. You're allowed to be emotional." Christmas came, and the Sullivans invited them for a celebration. Patrick had managed to shoot a wild turkey, and Mary had been baking for days. It was a merry gathering, with the children excited about small gifts and everyone singing carols. Helena felt the baby move for the first time that night, a flutter like butterfly wings inside her. She grabbed Thomas's hand and pressed it to her stomach. "Did you feel that?" His face lit up. "I did. That's our baby. That's our baby." They shared a long, tender kiss, and Helena heard Mary sigh happily across the room. When they broke apart, Patrick was grinning at them. "You two are sickeningly sweet together, you know that." "Leave them alone," Mary scolded. "It's romantic." As winter slowly gave way to spring, Helena grew larger and more uncomfortable. By April, she could barely see her feet and moved with the waddle of very pregnant women everywhere. Thomas fussed over her constantly, and she alternated between finding it endearing and wanting to throttle him. "I'm fine," she insisted for the 100th time. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I'm not made of glass." "I know, but your precious cargo," Thomas replied, kissing her forehead. "Humor me." Mary came to stay with them as Helena's due date approached, bringing her children with her. Patrick could manage on his own for a few days, and Mary wanted to be there to help with the birth. Dr. Morrison had agreed to come out to the ranch when the time came, but Mary's experience would be invaluable. Helena went into labor on a warm evening in early May, just as the sun was setting. The pain started as mild cramps, but quickly intensified. Mary took charge immediately, sending Jack to fetch the doctor and getting Thomas to boil water and gather clean linens. "You're doing great," Mary encouraged as Helena gripped her hand through a contraction. "Just breathe through it." Thomas looked like he might pass out. "Should I stay? Should I go? What should I do?" "Stay with me," Helena gasped. "I need you here." So Thomas stayed, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even though his face was pale with worry. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Dr. Morrison arrived and checked on Helena's progress, pronouncing everything normal even though it didn't feel normal to Helena. It felt like being torn apart from the inside. But finally, just as the sun rose on a beautiful May morning, their son was born. He came into the world howling lustily, his tiny face red and scrunched up with outrage. Dr. Morrison cleaned him off and placed him in Helena's arms, and she looked down at the tiny person they had created with overwhelming love. "He's perfect," she whispered. Thomas was crying openly, staring at his son with wonder. "He's so small. Is he supposed to be that small?" "He's a good size," Dr. Morrison assured him. "About 8 pounds, I'd say. Healthy lungs, too, from the sound of him." They named him Timothy Samuel Irvine after both their fathers. Little Timothy had Thomas's green eyes and a shock of dark hair. He was beautiful and perfect, and Helena couldn't stop staring at him. "Thank you," Thomas said, kissing Helena's sweaty forehead. "Thank you for him. Thank you for everything." "Thank you for stopping that day," Helena replied softly. "For seeing me crying and not just walking past. You changed my whole life, Thomas. We changed each other's lives." The weeks after Timothy's birth were exhausting but joyful. Helena recovered quickly, though she was grateful for Mary's help in those first few days. Thomas was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. He would sit for hours just watching Timothy sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. Jack declared himself the baby's honorary uncle and took his role seriously, whittling toys and rocking the cradle when Timothy was fussy. The Sullivans were constant visitors, and little Benjamin and Sarah loved the baby, though they had to be reminded to be gentle. As spring turned to summer, Helena reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. She had arrived in Idaho broken and desperate, and now she had everything she had ever dreamed of: a loving husband, a beautiful home, a son, and good friends. She thought sometimes about William Thatcher and the life she might have had if he hadn't abandoned her. She could only feel grateful that things had worked out the way they did. One evening in late summer, she and Thomas sat on the porch watching the sunset while Timothy dozed in his cradle between them. The ranch was thriving, the cattle were healthy, and the future looked bright. "I never asked you," Thomas said suddenly. "Do you ever regret saying yes that day? Do you ever wish things had been different?" Helena looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. You saved me, Thomas, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me a life better than anything I could have imagined." "You saved me too," Thomas said quietly. "I didn't realize how lonely I was until you were here. You made this house a home. You made my life complete." They kissed as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Timothy stirred and made small baby noises, and Helena picked him up, settling him against her shoulder. "We should think about giving him a brother or sister eventually," Thomas said with a grin. "After all, you said you wanted a house full of children." "Eventually," Helena agreed, laughing. "Let me recover from this one first." The years that followed were full and happy. Timothy grew into a sturdy, curious toddler, always getting into mischief and making everyone laugh. When he was 2, Helena found herself pregnant again, and the following spring they welcomed twin daughters, Rosa Leaner and Grace Catherine. Thomas declared himself outnumbered by females and couldn't have been happier about it. The ranch continued to prosper and grow. Thomas bought more land and increased his herd. Jack stayed on, becoming as much a part of the family as hired help. Mary and Patrick remained close friends, and their children grew up together, running between the two ranches like they owned them both. When Timothy was 5 and the twins were 3, Helena became pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the others, and Dr. Morrison advised her to rest as much as possible. Thomas worried constantly, but Helena was determined to see it through. In the winter of 1889, she gave birth to another son, Samuel Thomas Irvine, named after both his grandfathers and his father. 4 children, Thomas marveled, holding tiny Samuel while his other children crowded around to see their new brother. "We're well on our way to that full house you wanted." "I think 4 might be enough," Helena said tiredly, though she was smiling. "Any more and we'll need a bigger house." "Then we'll build a bigger house," Thomas declared. "Whatever you need, whatever you want, I'll make it happen." And he did. Over the next few years, Thomas added on to the original house, creating more bedrooms and a proper parlor. The ranch became one of the most successful in the area, and the Irvine name became synonymous with hard work, fair dealing, and community spirit. Timothy grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. The twins were lively and clever, always getting into adventures together. Samuel was the baby of the family, sweet-natured and happy. The house was indeed full of noise and laughter, just as Helena had always dreamed. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Helena back to the park in Caldwell where they had first met. The bench was still there under the cottonwood tree. They sat together, holding hands while their children played nearby. "You remember that day?" Thomas asked. "How could I forget? I was crying my eyes out, thinking my life was over, and then you appeared and changed everything. I remember thinking you were the prettiest thing I'd ever seen, even with tears streaming down your face. I remember my heart pounding when I asked you to marry me, sure you'd think I was crazy and run away." Helena laughed. "I did think you were crazy. I also thought you might be my only chance. I'm so glad I took it. So am I." Thomas pulled her close and kissed her tenderly. "Best decision I ever made." They watched their children playing, watched the sun set over the town, and reflected on all the years of love and laughter they had shared. The mail-order husband who never came had led Helena to the real love of her life, the cowboy who had seen her crying and offered her everything he had. As they walked back to their wagon with their children chattering around them, Helena felt a profound sense of contentment. This was the life she was always meant to have. This was home. The years continued to pass in the comfortable rhythm of ranch life. Thomas and Helena grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated births and mourned losses, and built a legacy that would last long after they were gone. Timothy married a smart young woman named Elizabeth when he was 22, and they settled on a portion of the ranch that Thomas deeded to them. Rose and Grace both married neighboring ranchers' sons within a year of each other, and Samuel surprised everyone by going to college in Boise before returning to take over the main ranch operations. Thomas and Helena became grandparents, and then great-grandparents. Their home remained the center of family gatherings, always full of love and laughter. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Helena looked around at the life they had built and felt tears of joy streaming down her face. "What's wrong, Grandma?" one of the little ones asked. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I'm just happy. So very, very happy." Thomas squeezed her hand, understanding without words. They had been blessed beyond measure, and it all started with one impulsive act of kindness on a hot August day in 1882. When Helena was 68 years old, she fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Despite Dr. Morrison's best efforts and Thomas's devoted care, she slipped away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family. Thomas was devastated by her loss, but he took comfort in their children and the life they had built together. He lived another 5 years, spending his time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandmother and the day he had asked her to marry him in a park. "I saw her crying on a bench," he would say, his old eyes growing distant with memory. "And I knew right then that I was going to marry her. Call it crazy, call it fate, call it whatever you want, but I knew." Thomas Irvine passed away quietly in his sleep in the spring of 1931, just a few months shy of his 80th birthday. He was buried next to Helena on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their children and grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, celebrating a love story that had started with tears and ended after nearly 50 years of devotion. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management, passed down through the generations as Thomas had always hoped it would be. The little house that Thomas had brought Helena to that first night was preserved and maintained, a testament to where it all began. And in the park in Caldwell, the bench where Thomas had proposed to a crying stranger remained, weathered by time but still standing. Local legend grew around it, the story of the cowboy who had married a desperate woman on sight and loved her for the rest of his life. Young couples would sit there, hoping some of that romantic magic would rub off on them. The story of Thomas and Helena Irvine became part of the fabric of Caldwell's history, proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected moments. A missed train, a broken promise, a kind stranger, and a bold proposal had led to a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when we think all hope is lost, life can surprise us with exactly what we need. Helena had needed a home and security, and she had found those things. But she had also found so much more: a true partner, a great love, and a beautiful life beyond anything she could have imagined. And it all started because a cowboy saw a woman crying and decided to help. Such a small act of kindness, such enormous consequences. That was the magic of their story, the simple truth that sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fanfare and grand gestures. Sometimes it appears in the form of a dusty cowboy kneeling in the dirt, offering a stranger his hand and his heart with no guarantee of anything in return. Helena had taken that hand, and it had changed everything. Not just for her, not just for Thomas, but for all the generations that came after them. Their descendants carried their story forward, telling it to their own children and grandchildren, keeping the memory alive of the day that started it all. In the end, that was their greatest legacy, not the ranch, not the land, not the money or possessions. It was the love they had shared and the family they had created. It was the proof that sometimes taking a chance on a stranger can lead to everything you've ever wanted. It was hope, pure and simple, the idea that even when life knocks you down, there might be someone waiting to help you back up. And if you're very lucky, that someone might just be the person you've been waiting for all along, even if you didn't know it until you looked into their eyes and saw your future looking back at you. That was what Helena had found in Thomas's green eyes that day in the park: her future, her home, her heart. And in return, she had given him everything he had been searching for without knowing it: purpose, partnership, and a love that would last beyond death itself. Their story lived on, passed down through the years, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and taking a leap of faith when it matters most. It reminded people that happy endings are possible, even when they come from the most unlikely beginnings. It proved that sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones that follow a predictable path, but the ones that twist and turn in unexpected ways before arriving at exactly where they were always meant to be. Thomas and Helena Irvine found their forever on a park bench in Caldwell, Idaho, in 1882, and they built a life together that became the stuff of legend. They proved that love doesn't always come when you're looking for it, and sometimes the person you're meant to be with is the one who shows up when you least expect it and offers you everything with no strings attached. Their grandchildren's grandchildren would tell the story still, keeping the memory alive of the day a mail-order husband never came. A woman cried on a bench, and a cowboy changed both their lives forever with 3 simple words: "Marry me instead." And she had said yes.